Hello, and welcome to Doing Time, where humans talk about their experience doing time in a psych ward. Today we have guest Carly Kane, who's a Chicago comedian, writer, producer, and one of my really good friends. Hi, Carly.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And Carly we're going to talk about our experiences in a psych ward, and Carly has some pretty similar experiences to me, and so that's kind of why I brought her on as my first guest. So I'm really excited to have you.
Hell yeah. I'm excited to be here.
Yay.
We do. We have very similar...
Yeah, it's weird.
We met each other and we were like, oh, another thing in common.
Yeah,
Crazy.
yeah.
Okay, getting weird.
I have a stalker.
But it is interesting and I think to be able to like have an open dialogue about like mental health and like the journey within that, and then when you find someone that like we didn't know each other and it's like, oh, you're living and dealing with the same thing that I am. How many other people are that like just don't talk about it, or you know,
of course.
So
it was
many.
So nice to like meet somebody that I was like, I've been in a psych ward, and you were like, dude, 10 times. Are you kidding me? What? Yell it, dude. What are you doing? So like that for me was really nice to, and a lot of the experiences I feel like made me lead to get in one were similar to you in terms of random family stuff that wasn't even like I was like, nobody's been through this. My family's
well, that's the thing. Yeah, we're like, it's only me, I've been through this. And then
it's
like,
such a self in people, you know, the whole thing about like depression's a selfish, and it doesn't mean it's wrong, but it definitely can get super like you can get super self-engrossed and think that nobody.
Totally. I mean, that's what the depression tells you, that like the world revolves around you, but it also hates you. Mm-hmm. You know, that's like the mindset. It's like, I'm the only person that exists, and I'm also miserable, and so is everything. Right? I mean, a lot of sometimes mental health issues do come from a place of, you know, like it's like a self-obsession, this self-fulfilling prophecy, and that's why it can be so hard to get out of. Yeah. And then there's a stigma attached to it, so you're just like...
It's a cycle.
Yeah, even getting help, it's like, I can't talk about it. Even though it's like, well, you would go to the doctor for anything else.
Right, yeah. And there's that analogy of like speaking of it like it's a broken bone and whatever. And I definitely do agree with that. I think it is very stigmatized, but I want to ask you, have you always been, how many states have you done? Like what?
3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not, I mean, I've done 2. It's not, yeah.
Have you what did you notice in the differences between each state?
Oh man. Well, the one I did in Chicago was kids, because I was under 18, but I was like 18, so I just felt like a giant. I'm 5'2". I felt like a giant. There was an 8-year-old, and he was like, I tried to set my house on fire, and I was like, I don't feel safe here. Like, this is insane. And then in Denver, that one was, people were like, oh, Denver's so hippie. I'm like, but these are the ones that don't make it in that Denver culture. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're not calm at all.
Well, that's the thing, is like, it's I think sometimes the problem with treatment in a lot of these facilities is that they're putting everyone together that have completely different diagnoses. The only, you know, sometimes it's drug related, sometimes it's just mental health related, sometimes it's like family related, and the person is in there with no real mental health issues, but like just don't have a support system at home, so this is where they are. So it's like, it's so hard. That's why it becomes like a systematic thing. Once you're in one, like, you're probably going to go to another, because it's you're not really, I don't know, you have to pay a lot of money and in order to get like proper care in a lot of cases.
Have you seen people get kicked out because they didn't have money?
No, I was in a place with one girl. I was like very calm, and she was like, I'm just in here because my mom doesn't want me, so she makes up stuff about me, and I'm here. And it really was like, you know, the people that were working there knew, and so it was just a thing of like, so that was, I haven't seen, have you ever seen someone try to escape?
Oh no, I've seen people doing the freedom of speech thing, where they walk up to the desk and they're like yelling like, I'm blah 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 and blah 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 and I have freedom. I'm like, here's not the time. It's not anywhere else outside on the street. That would even be more appropriate. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
but like
100%.
But like, that's what the extent that I've seen is people get sedated, and that's where I was like, not in like an I don't belong here, but I'm like, I think there should be literally like levels of like anxiety and depression because I feel like
exactly there needs to be departments, or like there needs to be more funding so that people can get help based on what they need help for, because when you're putting everyone together, it's
not helpful.
It wasn't, in my personal experience, it was not helpful.
It's scary, dude.
It can be, because especially when you're in such a state of mind, and then there are other people dealing with, it's like, I
almost felt this is weird, but I almost felt like every time I had like the lead up to the psych ward, it was like the biggest deal, and then once I got there, I was like, oh, this is home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it was like I was like so depressed, and like, I tried to kill myself, and then one time I was like made such a big deal about how I was going to kill myself. That was the one where I was like, you make a big deal about it, people were like, well, we got to send you. You know what I mean? Because like legally we can't have this. So I would go, and then once I got there, I was like, oh, I actually feel like I hated it, but I almost felt comfortable, because I was like, at least I'm being taken. It's like a bubble.
It is. It really is a bubble.
Yeah.
And you're sort of in it in this weird, like, it's almost, like you get like your little packet, like it's camp or something, with like a notebook and like some socks, and you're like...
the socks are great. I mean, I gotta say, they have rubbers on the bottom. I mean,
no grip socks.
They really did well with that.
I'm trying to actually talk about it in a joke for the first time, and I'm like, you cannot even get these socks at Target. Like, you can't get them anywhere else. No. But it's a fine line. It's also a fine line too of like, because there's nothing glorified about the experience.
No, we're not doing that bullshit.
Yeah, no, it's not.
We're not going to talk about that. We're not glorifying anything. I'm just saying it's like those socks. I mean, we're going to still talk about it. I'm just letting you know. But
great. I mean, they take your shoes. They take everything.
Dude,
it's like,
my aunt has been a psych. They're just general hospital socks. But my aunt still has them, and she talks about them. She's like, oh, I keep them. My mom's like, you're disgusting. What are you doing? They're gross. But yeah, no, I actually, it's so, I think the reason why I felt calm, and I think I just realized this while saying it, is because people care. They're like, oh, now you're actually on watch, and people have admitted you to a place where they're like, no, we can't let you out of our sight. And as a comedian, as somebody who generally likes attention, that does feel good. When you're like, oh, somebody cares about me enough to be like, oh, we care if you're going to kill yourself.
I mean, I was always the funniest.
Yeah, I'm sure you killed. Destroyed, dude.
No, I'm destroyed. But, well, let me know if, I think also the comfort in those places comes from, and let me know if you can agree with this, is that you are in a place also with your peers who are going through the same exact thing. And a lot of my friends, like, in school were people that were also living and experiencing depression, but we were, like, hiding from it in school, like we would eat lunch in the bathroom, and it was sort of this, like, camaraderie that you I think at any stage of, like, going through the worst of whatever, it was like I always had friends that were going through the same thing. Like, you sort of latch onto each other. And then when you're in a facility, like, you don't have to pretend anymore. And, like, your peers don't have to pretend either. So you're sort of at this place of, like, this is it, Like, we can let our guard down. Like, we can, so there is, like, I don't know, I made a lot of, like, do you keep in touch with anyone that you've met?
I used to a little bit, and then they were, like, when I kind of grew out of people in a sense where, like, totally. They kind of kept going, but yeah, there was a few, like, my roommate, the first one, she was really cool, and then the friends there were dope, but like to speak to what you said, it's like when you get there and like you're saying, at school, if you say you have depression, people like look at you like your head's cut off, but then when you go to the psych ward and you say, like, I tried to kill myself, they're like, oh, okay, you tried to kill yourself. I try to jump. Like, it's kind of like going to AA and you're like, I smoked too much weed, and they're like, get the fuck out of here, dude. Like,
you're finally in a place where it's like other people have similar and also varying circumstance, and I don't know. I remember always, like, everyone would become such close friends for that short period of time, and then when people would get out, I remember one girl tried to escape.
Oh, dude.
And it was, like, so poorly planned. She put no thought into it. It was, to this day, one of the funniest things. Just only because she had been in there she was like, She had been in there the longest, and she was like, I gotta get out of here.
What was she in for? What?
I think depression-related stuff. Like, she would get, like, really serious. But the reason she was still in there was because she was, like, trying to escape. It's like, just don't try to escape.
Right, just get better. People aren't in that.
And totally. And I can't remember exactly the specifics, but she's very funny and, like, very full of life. And one day, we were just, like, all playing with pipe cleaners or something, and she just made a run for it. And the thing was, everyone just kind of watched for a minute.
Right.
Even the staff, because they knew there were people that were going to get it, you know.
Of course. Yeah, they're like, let's see what she's going to find.
You know, we're all just watching her, like, part of us are like, yes, keep going. And then the other half of you was like, I want her to be safe, I don't know. And then she just tripped over a branch, and you just saw, like, the people walk up and help her up, and it was like...
Yeah, they're like, oh, no,
I was just like, come on, girl.
And those, you know, all those stupid rules that they make are because of people who ruined it for everybody. Like, when I went, I think I asked for batteries for something, they're like, no, you can't use batteries. And I was like, what? And they're like, you know, somebody took them out of a clock and tried to swallow them, and I was like, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I'm like, well, I mean, I guess I'm in the right place for somebody to do that. You know what I mean? But it's so, no conditioner.
No.
No hair tie. Dude, my hair was with a rubber band for like a week. It was, because I have OCD, and like the not showering and being like fully clean with my hair, I literally wanted to kill myself. I was like, this is making it worse. And it's because the conditioner thing. I don't know if did you have that where you can use conditioner?
Yeah, I remember
because it has
in one.
alcohol in it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And then the rubber. You can't use hair ties, but you can use rubber bands. What kind of logic?
Well, that's it. There's so many rules and things that I would never. Like, you would never even think of. No,
you can't, you know, the bras, you can't wear a bra with a wire.
Yeah, you cannot.
And for the first day, my mom didn't bring me bra. I walked around with my arms crossed for, like, because I had a breast reduction, but before, walked around with my arms crossed for 2 days.
Yeah, it's not like, when you already feel like shit, and then you're like, all right, here I am. Yeah, and it's just like, you're in, like... T-shirt. I remember I would just wear T-shirts every. You're kind of like living in a paused state of depression. I mean, I was when I would be in a lot of them, because you're just sort of like, this is my holding place until further notice.
Oh, it's kind of like jail.
There are like, I think it's like this Venn diagram of like summer camp and like a jail, and it's this weird, and it's like, let's talk about our feelings, but also you're just a folder, and I don't know anything about, like, that's the thing I noticed, too, is that these doctors were just...
No, dude.
They would be like, so who are you? And it's like, what if you...
No, they
don't know who you are, they just give you these medications, just so it's...
They prescribe medication without making any eye contact. Yeah. They are staring at that piece of paper for, it says you overdosed here, and I was like, nice to meet you, doctor.
Yeah,
whatever. They just don't even... It's insane. I remember, like... They gave me, I told them my first night, I was like, I can't sleep. And they were like, whoa, here's a trazodone. And I took it, and I hallucinated. You never asked me, how much do I weigh? How much, like, have I ever taken medication? Am I allergic to anything? They literally just gave me one of those, like, plastic cups with the pill in it.
Oh, my gosh. You just
lift up your tongue, and then you're just like, ugh. And it's...
Oh, your tongue.
Yeah, it's so bad. And then I hallucinated, like, I woke up, like, 5 times within, like, 20 minutes, just, like, hallucinating, and it was so, that medication is so scary. But then it just speaks to the fact that they don't, like, it is a holding place, and a lot of people who come there need to be medicated, and that's the only issue.
But the thing is, like, people end up, I was mismedicated until I went through, like, this 6-week, like, extensive program, and they did hours and hours of, like, testing and, like... You know, meeting with the doctor multiple times. And then they finally put me on a medication that worked. And then they, finally put me on a medication that worked.
Stabilized.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it worked for me. Because the program that cared about me was the 6-week one. It was outpatient. I went home every day. But that's the only one that they cared about me. And I felt the doctor, like, he talked to me like a person.
And that makes such a fundamental difference.
So much. And, and I want to ask you, you're a comedian, obviously, but do you were you like the cool person in the groups? Like you, like the person that was like funny. Like what were you like?
I think like all social hierarchies and like cliques sort of like disappear. Like there are people that like come to each other. Like obviously that'll just happen. I think I tried really hard to be cool in high school, but then when I would go here, I'd be like, oh, I don't have to try. Okay,
yeah.
But then you're just yourself, and it's sort of like a way to you have to open yourself up to like all different types of people. I don't know. That's an interesting question because I think by the time I was in there, I was never thinking about like what is my. I definitely would crack a few jokes when I could, you know, and like. I remember I found actually we had to write all these cards, like people where you have to like write compliments for people. Yeah. Which I also think, you know, it's pretty nice stuff. I'm like, yeah, this is nice to hear. Yeah. And everyone would be like, thanks for the laughs. Yeah. I'm like, I guess I was really cracking them.
I'm so good at my craft that I don't even realize I'm doing it, but it's like, just yeah.
So I think everyone sort of turned to humor is something I noticed. Like everyone is just like. Yeah. This is
even with the therapist, dude. Like we had this one session where this woman, I think it was almost like reverse psychology, where she wrote on a board and she goes, "All right, so I want you to tell me everything that you've cut yourself with." And people left and right, people who never spoke were like Staples. Like it was insane, dude. And we all were cracking up, but it was the best relief I have ever had because
That's
it was
so
like
interesting.
It was like we all just like started yelling out because I've self-harmed but I talked about it and like it was just so interesting to just look at all those things on a whiteboard and be like, this is ridiculous. But it was hilarious because we were all like, we're so self-destructive and like every person in that room were like I thought was a good person. So it was like really cool to like, and that comic relief was definitely needed because you can't look at a board of like sharp objects and not kind of like be like, okay, this is like insane.
Yeah, because I think something like that can be effective, and a lot of places fear doing things like that because they don't want to give people ideas or like.
Right.
I remember there in one place they were like, you're not allowed to talk about your story with anyone. Like you can't share while you're in here.
Depression doesn't exist.
And we were like. Well, what are we supposed to talk about? Like, the courses of all of our lives are currently on pause. I was like, I'm supposed to graduate from high school, so I'm going to talk about it. Yeah. Like, I'm going to talk about it myself because I need to do that right now. Like, you know.
And you're in high school, so you're like, well, now I'm even more going to rebel.
Yeah, I learned, there were also a lot of hookups happening. A lot of people hooking up.
Okay, wait.
All the time. It is truly wild.
Did you hear it? Like, what? I want to know.
Yeah, girls would just, like, they would be like, yeah, we, like, just hooked up last night.
That's why you say it's, like,
interesting.
Because I was like, I don't get that.
Did you ever see,
No. My friend did, because I have a friend that's...
Well, I never participated, but, like, people were getting down.
Yeah,
I was just like, oh, wow. Like, more than high school. Like, it was like, I get it now, but at the time I was like, I'm so sad. I can't think about...
Have you ever seen that show that's, like, about, like, relationships after jail?
No.
Like, can you imagine if they did that, like after the psych ward, where they just follow people's stories?
It was a lot of...
It's like, I can't imagine being that vulnerable, like, in a place like that to hook up with somebody. That takes a lot of balls.
I think it makes sense. There's, like, a lot of emotion. And it's, like, you don't know what to do with it, so it would just be a lot of people just, like, hooking up a lot. And I think it was coming more, not even out, just, like, as a need for human connection versus, like, and then it's, like, everyone's, like,
I get
13 through 17, you know?
Right, oh, yeah. I get the hookup, like, I hooked up with somebody that was in a group therapy with me. We were in the same, like, outpatient therapy, but in a psych ward, it's different because you're being constantly, like,
it was a lot
monitored.
Of, like, roommates. They would just go for it and be like, and I was like...
Yeah, you're like, all right, well, if the door's open, I'm gonna fucking push it.
I think it was a good place for some people to figure themselves out in that way.
Yeah. Well, because you're also, when you meet somebody that has the same thing as you, it's almost like an instant, like that. Totally. When I met you, like, it's an instant connection. So if you meet a guy, like, it's so easy to catch feelings like that. Like when I hooked up with this dude, I was like, oh, he gets it, and then he ghosted me.
And then you have this, like, that dark fantasy, like, plays in here, which that's a dangerous thing. Yeah, that's very dangerous.
Yeah, you see yourself getting married and you've, like, said hi to each other. It's it's like elementary school. but you feel really connected because you're in a group talking about your deepest, like,
totally
things that you've been through. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. Do you want to talk about, like, your any sibling experience, like what kind of led you, like, or what affected you? Because I know we have a lot of similar stuff like that, like
oh, like what led to being in these places?
Yeah, or just like I know a lot of family stuff for me was just kind of like what I took on from my family, and like
totally. I mean, I think it was my parents just like didn't get along, and it was just not a good environment in general. So it was sort of me and my siblings getting sent away as frequently and as often as possible. So I think, not to say, I do think the times that I was in these places, I needed to, I don't know, like, if I was a parent probably, but I think maybe in all the circumstances it wasn't necessary. But yeah, it was just a lot of, I mean, I think, like, I was already predisposed to depression and anxiety just through genetics, but then when you're also in an environment that is just toxic, and that, like, honestly, Drew, so much of it is a blur, that it's like to pinpoint exact things or exact all of these hospitals sort of blend together, like why I went to why. It's like, it's sort of like trying to watch like a movie with like drunk goggles on or something. It's like, I don't even know. But it was just, all I know is that the environment I was in was just sort of, it's like when something like lets mold grow, it was just like let my mental illness grow and become worse. Yeah. Especially when the environment is out of your control and not improving, then of course I'm going to be back in this place every couple weeks. Right. And also, like, my parents, like, didn't really want me to tell schools, so for it's like if I was sick with something else, like, it's like, oh, yeah, well, we'll get your homework and we'll get all of that. And so for a long time. It's the physical
thing again, where it's like, oh, well, if you have a headache, of course they're going to understand.
And so I look back on that and I'm like, I mean, so much of mental illness is feeling guilt anyway. And then when you feel guilty for what you're going through. Yeah.
It's always like, oh, like, I'm going through this and that affects this person, so then I'm responsible.
And now woe is me, like, even. Right. And I think to an extent there was sometimes, like, comfort in knowing, like you were saying, like, when you would get there and you'd be like, oh, this is kind of home. Like, there was comfort in knowing that even if I scared myself, like, I would probably just end up in this place that I was familiar with, that, like, I know that, you know, the plastic might still be on the cheese and the sandwich, and, you know, like, it's like, don't even go to the food, you're just like, I know this is, you know.
But it's like you are kind of seen as a piece of paper, like, but that's what your experience is. The only way I do feel like it helped me was, and this sounds bad, but I got to see a lot of people who were just way worse. They were just.
Well, it gives you perspective.
Their mental health was way more, I'd say, down the hole than I was. Like, you know, we were in group therapy one day, and there was just one lady who was bipolar, and she was like, I tried to drive to go off the Golden Gate Bridge, but I got to the airport and thought I was there. Like, she was so delusional that she got, like, to the security, and she thought she was, like, where she needed to be. She just wasn't in reality. And I was like, I came here because I sometimes think I'm fat or whatever. And they're like, no.
But I think it's like, everyone's experience in there is valid, and you can't compare yourself, but it does give you perspective, and it shows you, like, it also makes you appreciate the things you do have in a state of mind where you're like, not to say that that's depressing, but you know what I mean. And
that's gonna be the tagline for that, like, Regina George, sick or whatever.
But you're totally right. I remember meeting someone, and she was like, you know, I think it's also, we have a lot of, like, preconceived notions of what certain mental illnesses look like. Like, I had an idea of what I thought, like, someone living with schizophrenia, how they would behave, and then I was in there with someone, and she was, for the most part, totally, you would never know. And she was like, when I experience anxiety, she was like, I see dead bodies falling out of trees, like bodies burning on fire. And she's like, she was like, I know that they're not real, but when you're seeing that, and so to talk to someone and be like, oh, I even had this thought in my head because of, whether it's the media or whatever we're taught growing up, but it's like, people live with these different things in very different ways. And
you're saying you're able to compare her illness to yours in the sense of like my anxiety, those negative thoughts could be similar to those things that she sees, kind of.
Well, it's like you notice that connection. Yeah. I'm also like, oh, I had an idea that someone with schizophrenia behaved differently, and that's my judgment. Or from someone else I met a few years ago who, was you couldn't really have like a conversation, and this girl's like, I'm fully, I know what's going on. It's just like I need to stop seeing these things.
Of course,
and I know
but
they're
if
not
anybody
real.
saw that, that's not
totally.
You couldn't, and I'm saying like way worse in terms of like their mental health was way on a scale where I looked at that and I was like, this is so, I can never imagine going through that, and that's why I think like it almost, not negatively, but it propelled me to be like, I can get through whatever I need to get through.
Totally.
Because this is, I want to help this woman, but in a sense of like, I want to share so that she can hear my experiences and I can hear hers, but I also want to kind of just look at it and be like, oh, well, like I can, because I was, like, for example, I got hospitalized in Denver because I was really struggling with diving and managing like my depression and diving, so I was sent to a hospital, and I told my diving coach, or my diving trainer, she was so amazing, and I told her, I was like, look, I'll be fine, I'm going to be here for like 3 days, I'm like, I'll be totally fine. And then she called me to check in, and like while I was on the phone, this girl behind me was like, I got a gun, I'm calling she was like on the phone with a gun store, like she's like, I got a gun, and then I was like, it's fine over here, and she's like, well, it doesn't sound good, and I was like, yeah, no, this is awful. But I looked at that and I was like, I told her, I was like, but at least my experience, this is something that I'm able to kind of control. Like I can look at myself and be like, oh, okay, my anxiety hasn't gotten to the stage where like this is what I'm experiencing, like something that awful where like I literally think that like that buying a gun is the only solution. And then I was like, well, at least that's not, my like what I've been through. So it's not. It's almost like in a negative way you're like comparing to them, where you're like, well, that's what they went through, and that sucks, but I'm going to use it to like, it's just perspective, and that's all it is. I think it's, but I'm saying, and I'm not saying what she went through is necessarily, it's not worse or better, whatever, but it makes you look at yourself and be like, okay, well, maybe I could do X, Y, and Z to get out of this, because clearly,
and I am in control of like getting the help for myself. Like I might be powerless to this in some ways, but like, let me use, you see what you're like, oh, I have these things that some people don't even have. Like,
right.
I know I'm in this reality. I know, like, so it's like, okay, well, let me use this to my advantage given my situation. I totally.
Of course. Well, no, because it made me look at her and be like, well, that's really sad that maybe she didn't have somebody to call. Like, I had people on my ass, like, calling me and, like, being like, how are you doing?
Yeah,
blah, blah,
and
blah.
some people don't have.
Some people don't have it at all. I met somebody, like you said, who came in and he was like, I'm homeless, and he was like my age. He was like, I'm homeless, and I've been sleeping on the train, and they finally just sent me here because I just needed a place to stay and whatever. And he was the funniest dude. I was jealous. He was the funniest dude in the psych ward, and like everybody loved him and shit, and he was dope. But I was able to look at that and be like, well, at least I have family visiting me and like seeing me, and like I have a home to go to, and like that for me kind of for the moment was able for me to be like, all right, I gotta get my shit together, show them that I improved, and then get out of here. Because like the one that I went to in Chicago, but it was like the kid one where I was like under 18, they hated how much anger I had, so they would like monitor me. It sucked because when somebody's watching, it almost makes you want to be more angry. You're like... But then finally, because I would like talk to my parents, I'd be like, yeah, fucking fuck, like I would just blow up. And then one time I called my dad, and I was like, you took an acting class, Drew. I'm like, you could fucking do this. And I called my dad, and I was like, hi, Dad. And they're like, look at her. Look at the improvement. They're like, 3 days. And I was like, bitch, this is... I know. I got taught how to do this.
Yeah, no. I knew exactly what to say to get out. Because eventually you're in somebody, you're like, hi, doctor, I'm feeling a lot better. I just had a moment. Yeah. I love my parents. Right. So
I mean, why am I even here?
Yeah, and it's like, I I think, yeah. Oh, I was like...
It teaches you how to be a little manipulative.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Which is shitty that's...
Of course, but to be honest, because of the state regulations and that, like, you must be here for 72 hours, whatever they're holding you to, it's so much easier to just be like, just pretend to be better. Because then once I got out, I was way better because I'm like, well, at least I don't have to go there. You know what I'm saying? Like, once I ate food, every time I was in the hospital, I was like, I just dreamed of, like, Portillo's. I got Portillo's, it was a tradition.
Just all I wanted was a Dunkin' Donuts egg sandwich on a croissant. That's it. I was like, I would do anything. I would do anything for just, like, something.
Cheese that didn't have plastic on. Yeah. And they also, like, I remember, like, the food. Did you have to do the menus the day before where you had to, like,
yeah. Oh, my gosh. You remind... Yes.
Yeah. And the pencils, they don't have erasers.
Yes.
Like, golf pencil. Who use... What are we going to do with eraser? I don't know. It's just...
people. Yeah.
Creative, I will say. But that made me feel... Well, it just makes you feel like you are in an inpatient facility. When you're circling what you want for dinner, and then you're like... I would write, like, I have a nut allergy. We don't give a shit about it.
Yeah, it's just, like, very sterile and, like...
Ugh.
The lighting. It's just not...
Have you ever looked at yourself in a mirror in a psych ward and you're like... Have I thought this whole time that I was a model? Dude, what? Do you know... I mean, it is like...
It's
a
humbling mirror look.
I'm like, this is why I kill myself.
Every time you look at yourself, you're like, oh, this is who you are? you have that moment of, like...
Yeah.
Because, you know, sometimes you walk past a mirror, you're like, this is what I look like. Not even if it's good or bad, you're just like, oh, this is me. I'm a human vessel. When you're there, you're literally like...
It's worse than any department's Macy's.
It doesn't matter. Any dressing room.
Yeah.
That light hits you and you're like, I didn't know I had acne here, and I didn't know my face looked like this, and
it's so bad. It's so bad. And I mean...
I'm like, this is what I imagined depression
Oh, yeah. When I walked in, I'm like, oh, I'm going to be the hot girl, dude. People are going to want to hook up with me, and I'm going to just play hard to get. I'll be like, I'm leaving in a day. Like, if you want, I can give you my number. You know what I'm saying? But then I looked at myself, and I was like, trash, dude. And then the sports... You got to wear a sports bra.
Yeah, I was always in T-shirts and...
Yeah. Yeah, oh, dude, and I would, I mean, when my friends came to visit me, that gave me perspective. Like, I don't know if you had friends visit you, but, like, I had a lot, my friends were allowed to visit me, and I had one friend, she was, like, the one friend that I could rely on for, like, anything. And she came and visited me, gave me gifts and stuff, and, like, nail polish, and I sat down with her, and I was like, this is where I eat every day, and it's like, it's so uncomfortable, and it kind of made me be like, I don't belong. Not like I don't belong here, but I don't think anybody belongs there.
Nobody
That's what I'm
does.
saying. It's like a place where, like, you know you're a little crazy from whatever you've been through, in the sense of, like, you have a disorder, and then you're put in a place where everybody is just, like, filled with this idea that they're insane, and then the way it's set up is just even worse. And so it's on
a perpetuative
constant
cycle, exactly.
Yeah. And so
it's
then
like a place to hold people. It's like, not all of them. In order to, like, go to a facility that, like, has high rates of success, it costs a shit ton of money.
Yeah, it was sad because I was in this one group, and this one lady who I loved her so. I don't know about her. I just felt so connected to her. She was probably like 40. I always feel connected to the old people because I'm like, I feel like I've lived more than, you know, people my age or whatever. So I had this one lady. She was like this. I don't know if she was an alcoholic, but something, and she was going through a divorce with her husband. I always kind of tried to listen to that because I was like, this is what my mom would sound like if she was here. You know what I mean? Because my parents are divorced, and so I kind of just looked to her as like a maternal figure. And she was, one day she was crying about how she like pulled out a gun and like put it to her head. She's like, I couldn't do it. And all of us were like, what? It was silent for so long. And after that, everybody kind of like felt more connected in a way because somebody shared something like that. Like such a crazy experience to like come out of.
Yeah.
And I felt so connected to her. And then she was like, it was just that for me. Like, I don't even know. There was something I was trying to say, but I just remember that and like feeling like, oh, the expensive thing. She got kicked out from her insurance. And for me to watch her leave was like I was like, did she survive? I don't have her number. Did she survive? It's like this thing that you can't, you're like, well, it's out of my control. She's dead or she's alive. I don't even know her name. I know her first name. I don't know her last name. Can I find her on Facebook? What if I find her on Facebook? What if she doesn't have a Facebook? It's like, it is like, I feel like I'm living in the olden days, because when you're in there, you don't have a cell phone. You don't have anything that you can kind of like connect with people. And for me, like, to see people get kicked out because they didn't have money, it's literally people dying because of that.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the help that they need, and so they're going to go home and, knock on wood, not do it. But if they did do it, it's because they weren't getting the help that they needed. And it is so scary. It's
so scary, and it's very sad. And like, I mean, that's someone, like, her story will probably stay with you for the rest of your life. It's like there's certain people, it's like, God, I can't remember like some of my good friends' last names, but like my close friends, like, that I met there, I feel like in every place I had like a close friend. Like, I remember all of them. Like, I'm like, I wonder where, I don't talk to any of them anymore, but, and I remember there was one conversation, the conversation that really like changed my life was talking to, it was in the final hospital I was in, and talking to this girl about why she was in there, which we weren't supposed to do, but we did it anyway.
Yeah, of course.
Her dad had successfully died. He committed suicide, and he had attempted it the same way I had attempted it. And so she was telling me, she was like, I wouldn't be in here if it wasn't for him doing that. She was like, you don't realize. And for me, it was like, when you're that depressed, you can't fathom that, like, you think you're doing people a favor. You're in this mindset of, like, you truly don't think about other people. So that was the first time where I had to, like, literally look at her, and she was like, I was like, oh, this affects the course of so many people's lives. And, like, I don't know. And that I'll never forget her name. I'll never forget that conversation. It changed my life. Like, it's like there's a sense of vulnerability in these places that, like, you don't find day to day. Because that's all you really have. It's like... is the ability to connect and share stories. It's so, and I remember too, like, for the way that my life changed wasn't as, like, it wasn't like talking to somebody that told me that, the same experience. I just took Xanax. Like, I was very unoriginal. Like, you know what I'm saying? My method was just... it doesn't matter. Right, but I will say, the one conversation that did change the course of everything was... I sat down with this girl, and I was like, she looks like... when you find somebody there that's like... You're like, I would hang out with her outside of this. Yeah. Not because I'm in here, but if I genuinely, like, had a place to... like, I would go shopping with this woman. Totally. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So this one therapist was so cool, and I was like, I feel like I know you from somewhere. Like, just because my town was so... everybody kind of knows each other. And so I talked to this one girl, and she was like... She didn't know me, and she goes, your problem's OCD. And I was like, what? I was like, how do you know me? She goes, I can feel it. She's like, she goes, tell me what your rituals are. And I was like, well, I count to 3 a lot, like, just the classic, like, tap shit, whatever. And I was like, I can't, I'm in here because I was diving, and I couldn't get off the board because I would, like, sit and, like, in my head, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And she was like, she's like, well, what would happen if you, like... And the one thing she said that changed me about cutting myself was, she goes, I want you to think of somebody you love. She's like, somebody that, like, if anything happened to them, like, it would ruin you. And I was like, my mom. Like, classic, but that's the truth, right? Yeah. So I told her then, she goes, I want you to imagine every time that you self-harm, you're cutting your mom. And I was like, that for me was like, that literally changed my life. And it's so cliche, but for me... It's not cliche. It gives you... Yeah. When you're not thinking about yourself, it's like you have to honor your body and yourself like your friend. And that's like a really hard thing to do, like somebody you love, because that's the only way to survive, is to love yourself. Yeah. Like, that's... And also, a lot of being in these hospitals is living in this mindset that you are sick forever and that you are a sick person. And, like, I was the depressed girl. Like, that was my identity during that time. I was like, yes. You have, like, a name tag, and then you're that's like, what I was like, this is... I'm sad. And I'm also now comfortable in this identity that I've created for myself. Like... Well, like you said, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah. Yeah. And then when she said that to me, they actually referred... like, shatters that idea. And she referred me to an OCD program, and I did exposure therapy, which absolutely, like, just what does that involve? Exposure therapy. Okay, so basically the best way to explain it, like, this one person I knew in there, she was afraid of elevators. So they would kind of slowly put her into an elevator. You have to face your fear.
So she told me, she was like, your problem is your OCD. Like, your anxiety is stemming from it. You have anxiety, which leads to depression because you're too anxious about doing something, so you stay inside, whatever. She's like, this literally revolves around your OCD. And so I was like, okay, you know. And then I kind of listened to her, and I was like, you're right. And I went to the program. The program changed my life. But for me, and a lot of times it would happen when I was reading. So if I was reading, like, a book, I would read a sentence, and I'm like, oh, I don't understand that.
Oh, yeah.
So I would kind of like conjure up a way to understand it in my mind versus what the author said. I can't even verbalize sometimes what I would do, and then I would count to 3 a bunch of times until I felt like I could move on with the rest of the book. So they're like, you read like 20 minutes per page because you're so focused on like getting this right. So what they would do is they were like, go home, read 10 pages, and then time yourself. And then we're going to ask you to do it tomorrow, and then the next day. And the less and less time it took me to read, the more they knew I was improving. But they're like, we're not going to know if you're saying this shit in your head. You know what I mean? But what you're going to have to do is, you're paying money to come here. So it's your loss. If you're telling us you're getting better, we're just going to assume that because dude, the craziest thing I did there was I was like, I have a fear of people judging me. So when I'm talking to you, even in this conversation, I just think about, are you judging what I'm saying? Are you thinking blah, blah, blah? And everybody's like that at just a certain extent. So I would walk around with a Post-it note that said, please judge me.
Oh my God.
And then they would pull out table topic cards like that you have those stick figure families you see on the back of a card. Those families who have these types of cards, they would pull it out and it'd be like, name your favorite restaurant and why. What type of food is it? And then I'd be like, I really like Italian food. They're like, ugh, why would you like Italian food? And I'm like, ugh, because pizza. You know what I mean? It was just so...
That's so interesting, but it was effective?
It was effective because I was like, well, this isn't that bad. You're exposed to things that you think are earth-shattering. And then you're like, well, whatever. If they like American food, I'm gonna deal with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like very it's cathartic. It was scary. I had to do it for eating disorder thing, where I would tell them things that I thought was healthy. Because you know when you have eating disorder, you think even if I'm eating a strawberry, they're like, well, fruit has sugar. Why are you eating that? So I would be like, well, I ate a salad last night, and they're like, ugh, salad. They're like, you know, lettuce doesn't even have nutrients. And I think I cried after I did that a couple of times because I got so worked up about it. I was like, oh, they're actually judging me. But they weren't. And then I realized, I was like, that's the worst that's going to happen. People judge me for what I eat. And it got a little better. And now I'd say 80% is like where I'm able to let go of OCD stuff. And that helped me so much. And it was individual. You know when you go to all these group therapies, you're in and you're out because you get 3 seconds. You say your name, 3 emotions that describe me right now.
Oh my God, I forgot about all.
And then what I did yesterday that made me feel like today's whatever these emotions are, right? So, an individual, it's literally all about you. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what helped me. But yeah, we're gonna probably wrap up a little bit. Okay, maybe say like how much time do we have?
About 2 minutes.
Okay, maybe say like what you do. That like feel like personally I feel like I won't end up in a psych ward again. Like I genuinely think I'm in a good enough place where I have the tools to like get out of it.
Totally, I agree with that. Yeah.
Like what do you do? Not like, you know how some people are like, would take a deep breath. Like for
honestly,
you, like
breathing is a huge one. I also like try to journal, and I remind myself of like, I think this is like literally a me myself, but it's like, remember when you like wished you were the person you are today, where it's like even in moments where I get caught up in like, especially with stuff like comedy where you're literally worried about things that don't matter, and then it's like, okay, just literally being like, okay, I'm grateful, and if I'm still feeling anxious or I'm feeling sad, I know why. I think it's like checking in with myself always, which is something that people I think go their whole lives and don't do. I'm like, I have like 5 journals. I'm like, how did I feel last week? Like, and it's like, therapy is also cool, not really, it's not like that consistent, but it's just,
that's really cool.
I try to like reflect on my week, or like every year I do like a year in reflection, like things like that of just like, oh, let me check in with myself, because I agree. I'm like, I like to consider that I have the tools now, and I also like want to do things to help try and change some of the mental health, you know, like
of course,
stigmas and stuff. But I think just checking in with yourself and like knowing that you're not above the like, you know, even if I feel good today, I need to understand that if these feelings do come back up, that doesn't mean I've failed. Like, I recently
Right.
I tried to go off of my medication, and it wasn't really working for me, so I went back on, and I felt like a huge failure, and then I was like, no, this is just, what are we going to do now with this? I'm like, well, this is the last time we're getting back on it, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And, like, this is just what I have to do for myself right now, and this doesn't, you know, so.
Cool.
Stuff like that.
I love that. I'm going to.
Just check in.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Of course, thank
for
you.
doing the podcast and sharing everything.
Yeah, this was so nice to, like, have a conversation about.
Oh, I'm so glad. Okay,
Yeah.
it feels good.
Yeah, it does. It's nice to talk about.
Yeah, it's definitely a little weird, but like in terms of just like because, nobody talks about it, but I think people do. I think it's getting better, but I think
it is getting better.
It's weird in the sense of like people are like, oh, you're not even talking about depression. You're like, oh, I've been in a hospital, like whatever. So I think that's really good, and I'm glad you're here and everything. And
yeah, for people that are in that, like, it's
okay.
Shame. It's okay.
Yeah, no, don't.
You're just
don't
you just gotta know that you're worth it and that you'll get through it.
Yeah.
And you can.
Mm-hmm. You more? You wanna?
That's it.
Spitting fire? I mean, seriously, I should have you on all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much. And
of course, thank you for having me.
I don't have a closer. I'm just.
No, I think that's.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching. The name of your podcast.
Oh, thank you for watching Doing Time.